The sky above Geneva burned orange and red. Massive warships blocked the sun, their shadows falling across the ruined city like the hands of death itself. Commander Cale Morrow stood in the rubble of what was once the greatest city of human diplomacy. Now it was just ash and broken stone. Around him lay the bodies of his soldiers, good men and women who had fought until their last breath. The United Earth Defense Force had held this planet for 30 years against the Veth Dominion. 30 years of blood and sacrifice. No other species in galactic history had resisted the Dominion for so long. But even the strongest walls must fall, and today, Earth's wall had finally crumbled. Cale was 42 years old. His dark hair had turned gray at the temples from years of war. His face carried scars from battles on 3 continents. His eyes, once bright with hope, now held only a cold determination. He had watched his home burn. He had buried friends beyond counting. But he was still standing. The communication device on his wrist crackled with static. A voice came through, broken and desperate. "Commander Morrow, this is Transport 7. We are the last ship capable of leaving atmosphere. You have 20 minutes to reach extraction point. The Veth ground forces are closing in. Please respond." Cale looked at the sky. More ships were descending. The Veth were not content with simply conquering Earth. They wanted to erase it completely. That was their way. For 10,000 years, they had moved across the galaxy, absorbing or destroying every species they encountered. They believed themselves to be the final form of evolution. All other life was either useful or worthless. And the humans, with their stubborn resistance, had proven themselves too troublesome to absorb. So they would be erased. Cale pressed his communication device. "Transport 7, I hear you. I am moving to extraction point now." He released the button and looked around at the ruins one more time. Somewhere beneath this rubble was the old United Nations building, a place where humans had once gathered to solve their problems with words instead of weapons. It seemed like a fairy tale now. He should run. He should save himself. That was his duty to survive, to carry the memory of humanity to some distant star and hide until the Veth forgot about them. But something pulled at him. Something deeper than duty. Cale climbed over the broken concrete and twisted metal. His boots slipped on loose stones. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning. In the distance, he could hear the mechanical march of Veth ground troops. Their footsteps were perfectly synchronized, like the ticking of a clock counting down to extinction. He found the entrance to the old building buried under a collapsed wall. Using his bare hands, he pulled away the debris. His fingers bled. His muscles screamed. But he kept digging until he created a gap large enough to squeeze through. Inside, the darkness was complete. Cale activated the light on his helmet and moved forward. The halls were filled with rubble and bodies. He recognized some of them, diplomats and historians who had refused to evacuate, choosing to die with the building they loved. He found what he was looking for in a glass case that had somehow survived the destruction. Behind the cracked glass hung a flag. It was old, faded, and torn at the edges. Blue and green with the emblem of a unified Earth, a symbol from 2 centuries ago, before humanity had even reached the stars. It had been placed here as a reminder of a time when humans had first learned to see themselves as one people. Cale broke the glass with his elbow and carefully removed the flag. It was larger than he expected, the fabric soft despite its age. He folded it with the care of a man handling something sacred. Then he placed it against his chest, beneath his armor, close to his heart. The ground shook. The Veth were getting closer. Cale ran. He burst out of the ruins and sprinted through the burning streets. Behind him, he heard the sharp crack of energy weapons. Bolts of blue light flew past him, melting the stone where they struck. He did not look back. He could not afford to. The extraction point was a small plaza near the edge of the city. Transport 7 sat there, its engines already glowing with power. The rear door was open, and Cale could see other survivors inside. Soldiers, civilians, children. The last humans to leave Earth. He was 50 meters away when a bolt struck his left shoulder. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. His armor absorbed most of the energy, but he could feel his flesh burning beneath. He stumbled, but did not fall. He kept running. 40 meters. 30 20-dot hands reached out from the transport and pulled him inside. The door slammed shut behind him, and the ship lifted off immediately. Through the small window, Cale watched as the plaza where he had stood moments ago was consumed by Veth troops. The ship broke through the atmosphere, leaving behind the orange glow of a dying world. Cale pressed his face against the window and watched Earth grow smaller. He could see the continents now, covered in fire and smoke. The oceans reflected the light of 1,000 burning cities. 12 billion people had lived on that world. 12 billion lives, 12 billion stories, 12 billion dreams. Now, fewer than 50,000 remained, scattered across refugee ships fleeing in every direction. A medic approached Cale and tried to treat his shoulder wound. He pushed her away gently. "Later," he said. His eyes never left the window. The other survivors watched him with hollow expressions. They had lost everything. Their families, their homes, their future. Some were crying quietly. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process the enormity of what had happened. Cale reached beneath his armor and pulled out the flag. He held it in his hands, looking at the faded colors and the worn fabric. Such a small thing. Such a fragile thing. And yet, in this moment, it was the most important object in the universe. A young soldier, barely 20 years old, looked at the flag and asked, "What is that?" Cale did not answer immediately. He continued to stare at Earth through the window. The planet was a marble of fire now, growing smaller with each passing second. Soon it would be just another point of light in the darkness. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. "This is who we were, and this is who we will be again." He turned to face the survivors. They looked broken, defeated, finished. Cale held up the flag so everyone could see it. "The Veth think they have destroyed us. They think that by burning our world, they have erased our existence. But they are wrong. We are still here. And as long as we breathe, as long as we remember, humanity is not extinct." He made a promise then, not just to the survivors in that transport, but to every human scattered across the stars. A promise that every galaxy would eventually hear. They will know we existed. They will know we fought. And they will know we never surrendered. 7 years had passed since Earth burned. 7 years of running, hiding, and surviving in the dark corners of the galaxy. Cale Marl had become a ghost. A rumor whispered in the shadows of space stations and refugee camps. Some said he was dead. Others said he had gone mad. A few said he was still fighting. The few were right. Cale sat in the pilot's seat of his ship, a battered cargo hauler he had named Defiance. It was an ugly vessel, patched together from salvaged parts and held together by desperate hope. The engines made a grinding noise that never stopped. The life support system worked only half the time. But it was his, and it carried him where he needed to go. Beneath his worn jacket, pressed against his chest, he still carried the flag of Earth. He had not unfolded it since that day on the transport. It stayed with him always, a reminder of what he had lost and what he had promised. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was scattered across it like dust in the wind. Small groups of survivors had found refuge on mining colonies, agricultural stations, and the forgotten moons of distant planets. Most had given up hope. They worked for alien masters, kept their heads down, and tried to forget they had ever been free. Cale visited them when he could. He traveled under false identification codes, pretending to be a trader or a mechanic. He moved carefully, always watching for Veth patrols. The Dominion had declared humanity extinct, but they still hunted the survivors. A dead species was not supposed to cause problems. On a frozen moon called Vertex 3, Cale found a group of 40 humans working in an ice mining operation. They lived in metal containers, sleeping in shifts to share the limited heating. Their overseer was a Veth lieutenant who took pleasure in cruelty. Cale watched the operation for 3 days before making contact. He approached the oldest human in the group, a woman named Elena, who had been a teacher before the fall. Her hands were scarred from the mining equipment, and her eyes held the empty look of someone who had stopped hoping. "I know who you are," she said when Cale revealed himself. "You are the commander who was supposed to save us, the one who was going to lead the Great Resistance." She laughed bitterly. "Look around you. Does this look like resistance?" Cale did not argue with her. He simply asked if anyone still remembered how to fight. 3 young men stepped forward. They were brothers, born on a colony ship during the exodus from Earth. They had never seen their homeworld, but they had grown up on stories of human courage. Their names were Marcus, David, and Jonas. "What do you need us to do?" Marcus asked. Cale smiled for the first time in months. The operation was simple but dangerous. The Veth lieutenant made an inspection tour every night at the same time. He walked the same path, checked the same equipment, and returned to his quarters alone. He was arrogant. He believed that broken slaves posed no threat. On the 7th night, Cale and the 3 brothers were waiting in the shadows. When the lieutenant passed, they moved as one. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. The lieutenant never even had time to call for help. They freed the 40 workers that night. Using the lieutenant's access codes, they stole a transport ship and escaped before the Dominion knew anything was wrong. It was a small victory, but it was the first of many. Word began to spread. On station after station, moon after moon, Cale found humans who still had fire in their hearts. Not many, sometimes just 1 or 2 in each place. But he gathered them carefully, building something that was not quite an army but more than just a group of refugees. He found engineers who knew how to sabotage Veth machinery without leaving traces. He found pilots who could fly through asteroid fields and outrun patrol ships. He found doctors who had learned to treat alien species during the occupation. Each person brought something valuable to the network. The turning point came on Kestra 7, a mining moon in the outer reaches of Dominion space. 3,000 humans worked there, digging precious metals from the rock under the supervision of a Veth garrison. The conditions were brutal. Workers died every week from exhaustion and accidents. The Dominion did not care. There were always more slaves. The garrison commander had decided to make an example. 200 workers had failed to meet their production quota. The punishment was death. Cale arrived 3 days before the scheduled execution. He had 12 fighters with him now, including the 3 brothers from Vertex 3. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The garrison had 50 Veth soldiers and heavy weapons. By any reasonable calculation, the mission was suicide. Cale did not care about reasonable calculations. They struck at night, during a shift change when the guards were distracted. The brothers led a team to the power station and shut down the entire moon's electrical grid. In the darkness that followed, Cale and the others moved through the compound like shadows, targeting the Veth officers one by one. The battle lasted 4 hours. 6 of Cale's fighters died, including David, the youngest of the brothers. But when the sun rose over Kestra 7, the garrison was defeated. The 3,000 workers stood free for the first time in years, looking at the bodies of their former masters with disbelief in their eyes. Cale climbed to the top of the overseer's compound. In his hands, he held the flag of Earth, unfolded for the first time since the Exodus. The fabric was worn and faded, but the colors were still visible. Blue and green, the colors of a world that no longer existed. He raised the flag and let it catch the wind. The freed workers stared up at it. Many of them were too young to remember Earth. They had been born in captivity, raised as slaves. But something stirred in them when they saw that banner. Something deep and ancient passed down through generations of human blood. A Turani refugee stood among the crowd. The Turani were an insectoid species that the Dominion had conquered centuries before humanity even existed. They had long accepted their fate as servants. But this Turani looked at the flag with 4 curious eyes and asked Kale what it meant. Kale looked down at the alien and answered, with words that would echo across the galaxy. For years to come, it means we do not kneel. The Turani was silent for a long moment. Then it made a sound that Kale eventually learned was the equivalent of laughter. The Dominion has ruled for 10,000 years. No one challenges them. No one fights. Kale smiled. Then we will be the first. Within weeks, the story of Kestra 7 had spread to 100 worlds. Humans were fighting back. Humans were winning. A tattered flag flew over a liberated moon, a symbol of defiance in a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of the word. More importantly, other species began to listen. The Turani, the Valkyrie, the Marani, species that had surrendered generations ago, started to remember what resistance felt like. And at the center of it all, a man with gray hair and tired eyes continued to carry a flag that represented everything they had lost and everything they hoped to regain. The Wanderer had found his purpose. The ghost had become a legend. 12 years had passed since Earth fell. In that time, something remarkable had grown in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Something the Veth Dominion had never expected and could not understand. The hollow moons of Sirith were a network of abandoned mining tunnels deep in uncharted space. The tunnels stretched for thousands of kilometers through dead rock, cold and dark and perfect for hiding. Even the Dominion's most advanced sensors could not map them completely. It was here that Kale Morrow had built his headquarters, but he was no longer alone. The Great Hall had been carved from solid stone by Turani engineers. Their species had 6 arms and could work with a precision that amazed even the most skilled human builders. They had shaped the rough tunnels into something beautiful, a meeting place large enough to hold representatives from a dozen worlds. Kale stood at the center of the hall, looking at the faces around him. Human faces, yes, but also others. The tall, silver-skinned Valkyrie with their calm eyes and quiet wisdom. The massive Marani, aquatic beings who wore water-filled suits to survive on dry land. The small, quick Rethani, who communicated through color changes in their skin. 19 species in total, all gathered in this hidden place. 19 species who had decided to fight. A Turani elder named Crix approached Kale. Crix was old, even by Turani standards. His shell was cracked in places, and his movements were slow. But his mind was sharp, and he had become one of Kale's most trusted advisors. The young ones are restless, Crix said. They want to know when we will strike again. They have tasted freedom, and they hunger for more. Kale nodded. He understood that hunger. He felt it himself, burning in his chest like a fire that never went out. But he had learned patience during his years of wandering. Quick victories meant nothing if they led to ultimate defeat. The Dominion is starting to notice us, Kale replied. 3 supply convoys have disappeared in the last month. A garrison world went dark last week. They are asking questions. Let them ask. The voice came from a Valkyrie named Siren. She was tall even for her species, nearly 3 meters in height, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Before the conquest, her people had been philosophers and diplomats. Now, they had become spies, infiltrating Dominion bureaucracies and feeding information to the resistance. They are confused. They do not know how to fight an enemy they cannot see. Kale smiled slightly. That was the key to everything. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years by being unstoppable. They crushed opposition with overwhelming force. But you cannot crush what you cannot find. And you cannot fight an idea with warships. A Marani commander named Depth of Current spoke next. His voice came through a translator device, turning the clicks and whistles of his language into words the others could understand. My people are ready. We have sabotaged 17 warships in the main construction yards. When the time comes, those ships will not fly. How? Marcus asked. He had grown from a young miner into a seasoned fighter over the years. His brother's death on Kestra 7 had hardened him, but also given him purpose. The Dominion watches everything. How did your people get access? Depth of Current made a sound that might have been laughter. They use us as laborers in their shipyards. They think we are too stupid to understand their technology. They are wrong. This was the secret of the resistance. The Dominion saw conquered species as tools, nothing more. They never imagined that tools could think for themselves. They never considered that the slaves might be paying attention, learning, waiting. Kale had not created this coalition through military genius. He had created it by showing other species that resistance was possible, by proving that the Dominion could bleed, by carrying a tattered flag across the stars and refusing to surrender. Tell me about the Admiral, Kale said. Siren stepped forward. Admiral Vethkon, commander of the 8th Fleet. He is traveling from the core worlds to inspect the frontier. His personal cruiser will pass through the Nexer system in 3 weeks. We have people in his escort fleet. How many ships in the escort? 12, all crewed by mixed species. Marani, Tarani, Rathani, all loyal to us. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Siren was suggesting. An admiral of the Dominion, killed by his own escort. It would be the boldest strike the Resistance had ever attempted. It would also be the most dangerous. The Dominion will respond with fury, Crix warned. They will hunt us with everything they have. They are already hunting us, Kale replied. The difference is that now they will be afraid. For 10,000 years, no one has touched them. They believe they are gods, immortal, untouchable. We need to show the galaxy that gods can die. The vote was not unanimous, but it did not need to be. The coalition was not a democracy. It was an alliance of the desperate, held together by shared purpose and the force of Kale's conviction. Those who disagreed were free to walk away. None did. 3 weeks later, Admiral Vethkon's cruiser exploded in the Nexer system. The official Dominion report claimed it was an engine malfunction. But the truth spread through whispered networks and secret channels. The Admiral had been assassinated by his own crew. Species that the Dominion had enslaved for centuries had finally struck back. The response was everything Crix had predicted. The Dominion launched a massive hunt, sending fleets to search every corner of their territory. They executed thousands of suspected rebels. They tightened security at every installation, but they could not stop the tide. On 100 worlds, conquered people saw the news and felt something stir inside them. Hope, possibility, the knowledge that the Dominion was not invincible after all. Kale called a meeting in the Great Hall of Cirith. Representatives from 19 species stood before him, waiting to hear what came next. He climbed to a platform at the front of the room and mounted the flag of Earth. On the wall behind him, the banner was worn and faded. It had bullet holes and burn marks. It had traveled across the galaxy in the hands of a man who refused to give up. And now it hung in a hall filled with beings from a dozen different worlds, all united under its shadow. This is not a human rebellion, Kale said, his voice echoing through the stone chamber. Humanity was just the beginning. We showed the galaxy that it was possible to fight. Now it is up to all of us to finish what we started." He pointed at the flag. "This banner does not represent Earth anymore. Earth is gone. This banner represents everyone who refuses to disappear quietly. Everyone who would rather die fighting than live on their knees. Every species that looks at the Dominion and says, 'No more.'" The room erupted in sound. Cheers from humans, clicking from Tarani, color bursts from Rithani, deep rumbles from Morani. 19 species, speaking in 19 different ways, all saying the same thing. "We are with you." Kale looked at them all, these strange and wonderful beings who had become his family, and felt something he had not felt in 12 years. Hope. The war did not end at Nexus Prime. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years, and empires that old do not fall in a single battle. They had 1,000 worlds, countless soldiers, resources beyond measure. They were wounded, but they were not dead. 8 more years of war followed. 8 years of blood and sacrifice and hard-fought victories. The coalition grew stronger with each passing month as more species rose up against their masters. Worlds that had accepted Dominion rule for millennia suddenly found their courage. Slaves became soldiers. The silent found their voices. Kale Morrow led them through it all. His hair had turned completely white. His body carried the scars of 100 battles. He walked with a limp from an injury that never fully healed. But his eyes still held the same fire that had burned since the day Earth fell. And wherever he went, the flag went with him. The final battle came on Vathana, the throne world of the Veth. It was here that the Dominion had begun 10,000 years ago. It was here that they would end. The assault was the largest military operation in galactic history. 1,500 ships from 32 species descended on the planet. The Dominion fought with the desperation of the dying, knowing that defeat meant the end of everything they had built. Kale led the ground assault, as he had led every major assault since the war began. His soldiers tried to convince him to stay behind, to command from safety. He refused. He had walked this path from the beginning. He would walk it to the end. The fighting was fierce. The Dominion's last defenders were their best, soldiers who had sworn to die rather than see their empire fall. They made good on that promise. The streets of the capital city ran with blood from both sides. Kale pushed forward through the chaos, the flag wrapped around his left arm like a shield. He was 67 years old, far too old for frontline combat. But something kept him moving. Something beyond physical strength. Something beyond human endurance. He reached the steps of the Grand Palace just as the sun began to set. The building was the oldest structure on Vathanar, built when the Dominion was young and full of dreams of conquest. It had witnessed the beginning of an empire. Now it would witness the end. A Veth soldier appeared from the shadows. He was young, barely past training. His weapon was raised, aimed directly at Kale's heart. Kale did not flinch. He looked at the young soldier and saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. Fear of a future without the Dominion. "You can kill me," Kale said quietly, "but it will not matter. This war is already won. Your empire is already dead. The only question is what comes next." The soldier's hands trembled. For a long moment, the two enemies stood facing each other, separated by decades of war and billions of dead. Then the soldier lowered his weapon and stepped aside. Kale climbed the steps of the Grand Palace. His legs were failing. His vision was blurring. Blood dripped from wounds he could no longer feel. But he kept climbing at the top of the steps. He planted the flag. The pole drove into the ancient stone with a crack that echoed across the silent battlefield. Kale wrapped both hands around it, holding it upright. Below him, soldiers from both sides stopped fighting to watch. Coalition troops, Dominion defenders, all of them staring at a single human dying on his feet, refusing to let go of a piece of cloth that represented everything. A Veth energy lance caught him in the chest. Kale did not fall. His hands tightened on the flagpole. His body sagged, but he remained upright, held in place by nothing but pure will. A Tyranny war drone captured the moment. An old human, mortally wounded, his hands still gripping the banner of his extinct homeworld. On the steps of the palace that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, the image was transmitted across every communication channel in the galaxy. Kale died as the sun set over Vathanar. His body was found still holding the flagpole, his grip so tight that it took hours to pry his fingers loose. The flag flew above him, stained with his blood, torn from years of war, but still visible. Still flying. The war ended 6 months later. Without Vathanar, the Dominion fractured. Their fleets surrendered one by one. Their remaining worlds declared independence. 10,000 years of tyranny came to an end, not with a bang, but with the quiet signing of treaties and the laying down of weapons. The galaxy was free. 200 years passed. The Galactic Free Assembly met in rotating session across a dozen worlds. 400 species participated, governing themselves for the first time in millennia. The old Dominion territories had become federations and republics, each finding their own path to democracy. Humanity had survived. They had built new Terra and a dozen colony worlds across the spiral arm. They had recovered, grown, and thrived. But they had not forgotten. On the anniversary of the war's end, every member world of the Assembly observed a moment of silence. Not for Earth, though its memory was honored. Not for humanity, though their sacrifice was remembered. The silence was for Kale Morrow. In the great hall of the Assembly hung the original flag of Earth. It was preserved behind protective glass, its tears and burns left unrepaired, a reminder of what it had endured. Beneath it, an inscription had been carved in 300 languages. He carried the last flag of a dying world. He reminded the galaxy that tyranny is never eternal, and that hope, once kindled, cannot be extinguished. He was one man. He was enough. New delegates from species that had never known Dominion rule sometimes asked why so much reverence was given to a piece of cloth and the human who carried it. They had grown up in freedom. They did not understand what it meant to live without hope. The older delegates, Tyranny, Belkari, Morani, and human alike, always gave the same answer. Because he did not fight for victory. He fought for defiance. And defiance is contagious. In the end, the Veth Dominion had not been destroyed by superior firepower or greater numbers. It had been destroyed by an idea that one stubborn species had carried across the stars in the form of a tattered banner. Humanity's gift to the galaxy was not strength. It was not technology. It was not military genius. Humanity's gift was the reminder that even in the darkest night, someone can choose to be a light. On New Terra, in a museum dedicated to the war, there is a statue of Kale Morrow. He is shown as he was at the end, old, wounded, exhausted, but still standing. His hands are wrapped around a flagpole. His eyes are looking up at the banner. Children visit the statue every day. They touch the stone hands. They look up at the flag dot, and sometimes, if they listen very carefully, they can almost hear the whisper of an old promise, carried across 200 years and 1,000 stars. They will know we existed. They will know we fought. And they will know we never surrendered. He bore the final banner of Earth. And he became the beacon of resistance. 17 years after the fall of Earth, the galaxy held its breath. Nexus Prime hung in space like a jewel of darkness. It was the administrative heart of the Veth Dominion, a fortress world that had never known war. For 8,000 years, it had stood untouched, protected by fleets and weapons beyond counting. The Dominion ruled their empire from this place. They believed it was invincible, They were about to learn how wrong they were. Cale Morrow stood on the bridge of the New Geneva, a cruiser built in secret by human engineers who had memorized the old Earth designs and improved them with alien technology. The ship was beautiful and deadly, a perfect blend of human stubbornness and galactic innovation dot around him. Through the viewports, he could see the fleet. 400 vessels from 18 species. Tarani swarm carriers that could launch thousands of small attack craft. Valkyrie stealth ships that could appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. Marani dreadnoughts that hit like hammers. Human frigates that were fast and agile. It was the largest Allied force assembled. Since before the Dominion's rise, it was still not enough. The Dominion fleet defending Nexus Prime numbered over 1,000 ships. Their orbital stations bristled with weapons that could crack planets. Their ground forces were the elite of the elite, soldiers who had never known defeat. Marcus stood beside Cale, studying the tactical display. The years had changed him. He was no longer the young miner from Vertex 3. He was a commander now, scarred and seasoned. But his eyes still held the fire of his youth. "We are outnumbered 3-1, Marcus said quietly. "Our analysts give us a 12% chance of victory." Cale smiled. 12% is 12% more than we had when Earth fell. The battle began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. The Allied fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The Dominion, for all their arrogance, responded quickly. Their ships moved to intercept, filling space with weapons fired that turned the darkness into deadly light. Cale had studied Dominion tactics for 17 years. He knew how they thought, how they fought, how they won. They relied on overwhelming force and perfect coordination. They expected their enemies to break and run. The Coalition did not run. The Tarani swarm carriers released their attack craft. Thousands of small ships flooded the battlefield, each one piloted by a being who had lived in slavery and chosen to fight. They were not trying to destroy the Dominion fleet. They were creating chaos, filling space with so many targets that the Dominion's perfect coordination began to fracture. The Valkyrie stealth ships appeared behind the Dominion lines and struck at their command vessels. The Marani dreadnoughts pushed through the center, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed lesser ships and dealing it back tenfold. And the humans did what humans had always done. They adapted. They improvised. They refused to die. The battle lasted 9 days. On the third day, a Dominion missile struck the New Geneva's communication array. The explosion killed 20 crew members and left the ship unable to coordinate with the fleet. Cale transferred his command to a Tarani carrier called the Eternal Hive. On the 6th day, a Dominion boarding party fought its way onto the Eternal Hive. Cale led the defense personally, fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors of an alien ship. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Cale had a deep wound in his side, and the boarding party was dead. On the 8th day, the Coalition finally broke through the orbital defenses. The path to the planet was open, but the cost had been terrible. Of the 400 ships that had started the battle, fewer than 100 remained combat-capable. Cale gathered the surviving commanders for a final briefing. They looked exhausted. They looked broken. But they also looked determined. "The ground assault begins in 6 hours," Cale said. "I will lead it personally." Marcus objected. "Commander, you are wounded. You have not slept in 3 days. Let someone else lead." Cale shook his head. "I started this. I will finish it, one way or another." The assault shuttles descended through fire. Dominion ground batteries filled the sky with death. Half the shuttles were destroyed before they even reached the surface. But enough got through. Cale hit the ground running, a weapon in one hand and the flag of Earth tucked inside his armor. Around him, humans and Tarani and Valkyrie and Marani fought side by side. Species that had been enemies for millennia now bled together for a common cause. The fighting was brutal. The Dominion's elite soldiers were everything their reputation claimed. They were strong and fast and fearless. But they had never fought an enemy with nothing left to lose. The coalition forces pushed forward, street by street, building by building. They took losses that would have broken any normal army. But they were not a normal army. They were the desperate and the determined. The last hope of 1,000 enslaved worlds. Kale reached the steps of the High Arshanet as the sun set over. Nexus Prime. The building was the seat of Dominion power, where the High Archon himself ruled over the Empire. Its doors were sealed with energy barriers that should have been impenetrable. A Marani demolition team broke through in 3 minutes. Inside, the corridors were empty. The Dominion staff had fled or hidden. Kale moved forward with a small team, following the map that Valkyrie spies had provided years ago. He found the High Archon in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the destruction of his fleet. The Archon was ancient, even by Veth standards. His skin was gray and wrinkled, his eyes deep and cold. He had ruled the Dominion for 300 years. He had overseen the conquest of countless worlds. He looked at Kale with something that might have been curiosity. "You are the human," the Archon said. "The one who carries the flag." Kale did not respond. He was breathing hard. His wounds were bleeding through his armor. His left arm hung useless at his side. But he was still standing. "You cannot win," the Archon continued. "You are one species. One dying species. Even if you take this world, we have 1,000 more. We will rebuild. We will hunt down every survivor of your pathetic rebellion. And we will erase you from history so completely that no one will even remember your name." Kale reached inside his armor and pulled out the flag. It was torn and stained with blood. His blood, the blood of his enemies, the blood of 17 years of war. But the colors were still visible. Blue and green. The colors of Earth. "You do not understand," Kale said quietly. "I was never trying to win." The Archon tilted his head. "Then, what were you trying to do?" Kale smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. "I was trying to prove it was possible to fight. Every species out there watched you conquer the galaxy. They saw you as gods, unbeatable, eternal, but gods do not bleed." He pointed at the wounds on the Archon's body, injuries from the assault, marks of the battle. "And you are bleeding." They took the Archon alive. Kale personally escorted him to the front of the High Arshanet, where the coalition forces had gathered. And there, before an audience of every species that had ever suffered under Dominion rule, the High Archon was forced to his knees. Above him, mounted on a makeshift pole, flew the flag of Earth. The image was broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. A human battered and bleeding, standing over the kneeling ruler of the most powerful empire in history. Behind him, the banner of a dead world, still flying after everything, on 1,000 planets. Enslaved peoples watched that image and felt something change inside them. The Dominion was not invincible. The gods could fall. The galaxy had been sleeping for 10,000 years. It was finally waking up.